Buen dia a todas! Our topic is the Philippines within a century hence on the indolence of the Filipinos. The biggest anomaly that struck the heart of everything was that Rizal, witnessing the lack of unity or cohesion of the expatriate Filipino community, which drives him to write and also to act. He also attempted to sustain his narrative in his growing doubts. It was his last contribution to the altar of progress. In the present, Rizal's No Limitang describes the present, or what happened in the present, since it features the Spanish colonization here in the Philippines, and how the Spanish treated the Filipinos badly. The storyline goes to detail with the society of the Philippines during the Spanish colonial period, and features aristocracy behind poverty and the abuse of the colonialists or the Spaniards. And also, through his annotations to Morga, he composed a comprehensible or understandable memory from the past, which led him to be able to sketch or to foresee the future, which is entitled as the Filipinas dentro de 100 años. The annotated edition of Antonio de Morga's Events of the Philippines, or the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, helped Rizal to reconstruct the life of the early Filipinos, since Morga still saw and witnessed the pre-Hispanic Filipinos and their way of life. And also in his history book, Rizal showed his belief that the Filipinos were not equal to the Spaniards like what the reformist movement was extolling, but Filipinos are the people with a unique culture that the Spain destroyed. Filipinas dentro de 100 años. Rizal wrote it trying to predict the future of his motherland. His work foresaw the Philippines' future in 100 years by formulating current situations and circumstances in order to arrive at a vision of the Philippines' future. So, Filipinas dentro de 100 años is Rizal's essay that was arranged in series in the La Solidaridad magazine during September 30 to 1889 to February 1, 1890. It is also called as the Philippines a century hence, or translated as the Philippines within a century. So this essay served as a continuation where his Morga ended, and it also contains a Spanish rule. In the Spanish rule, it was stated, quote unquote, began a new era for the Filipinos. Little by little, they lost their old traditions, their memories, they forgot their writing, their songs, their poems, their laws, in order to learn by rote other doctrines which they did not understand, another morality, another statics different from those inspired in their race by the climate and their manner of feeling. So this implies that the Filipinos in the next century or in the next 100 years will form a new identity as a result of foreign adaptation, or as a result of adapting the Spanish practices that they have lost, or they have lost track of who they are. Now, as a result of foreign adaptations, here comes the Filipino self-degradation. Staying true to Herderian theme, Rizal was in sorrow as he witnessed the Filipino spirit's degradation. They easily surrender to the Spanish rule that leads them to lose their identity and patriotism. They abandon their own practices and praises what was foreign. Centuries passed, people's spirits was religiously hypnotized by the pomp, rituals, songs, lights, images dressed in gold, cults in mysterious languages, stories, miracles, and also sermons. But the question is, why did the Filipinos easily surrender? Now here are two factors. Number one is that it is the limited training and education Filipino natives receive. And lastly, segregated from the Spanish because they have their own community, Filipinos do not receive the same opportunities that are available to foreigners. As for Filipino self-degradation, here also comes the insulted race. So Indians were insulted that made them think or made them begin to examine themselves. So any virtue and human quality was denied to them, and there were also priests and some writers that made it worse by attacking personally, denying native sons, and disposing the vice. So it also comes with a severe repression. The Indians realized their pitiful condition and started to protest, which resulted to severe repression. Although only a few were awakened by the abuses and tricks of certain classes, the fierce and flaming spirits of the Indians to fight surely spread. This violence, or this great insult towards the entire race, erased the mutual hatred between people and also the provinces, now that they have seen through the deception. Now that the Indians have seen through the deception, they have their realization. So the ruler's affection and piety resembles, quote-unquote, the affection of a wet nurse who, unable to live elsewhere, desires their perpetual childhood, the eternal weakness of the infant, so that she can continue to receive her salary and survive at the cost of her reward. So this scenario indirectly implies that to be able to survive, one picks someone as a sacrifice, or he picks on someone who's more vulnerable, someone who's unable to fight. So concerning this realization, will the Philippines remain a Spanish colony? Will she become a province? Or will she eventually separate and live independently, with all the risks that this entails? So with all the abuses and belittlement the Indians have faced and experienced, and they have come into realization, and also these have seen through the deception of the Spaniards, it is possible that the Philippines will not become a Spanish colony. It will eventually gain its independence. As a rebuttal to the Indians' protest, the Spaniards have an analyzation in this dire situation. So the Spaniards were forced to think that, quote-unquote, the storage batteries are charging little by little, and if the prudence of the government does not provide an outlet for the complaints that are accumulating, it's possible that one day a spark may issue. So it means that the storage batteries are the Indians, they are charging little by little, or they little by little uniting to protest or to have a revolution. And if the government or the government ability will not provide an outlet or something that will cater the Indians' concern or complaints, it is possible that one day a spark is something that is a fight or a war may issue or begun. So this insinuates if the Spanish government will just disregard the existing complaints from the Indians regarding their abuse, they may have they can start a war to think that they are gradually uniting. There is also an existing statement that if those who guide the destinies of the Philippines should be obstinate, and instead of granting reforms which to make the country retrogress, increase their severity and repression of the classes that suffer and think, they will succeed in making them take risks and stake the miseries of an insecure life, full of privations and bitterness, on the hope of obtaining something uncertain. So if this mindset was followed soon, it will be chaotic, thinking that the ruler will be stubborn and inflexible. Surely it will result to rebellion or revolution. Previous revolutions have failed, but a new social element emerges. So this ensures a different outcome with genuine reforms. The nation's spirit was awakened, experiencing the common misfortune and abasement that leads all the inhabitants of the island to be united. One can count on a large educated class within and without the archipelago, a class created and increased more and more by the stupidities of certain rulers who compelled the inhabitants to expatriate themselves, to seek education abroad, and it supports itself and fights. Thanks to the agitation and the system of rounding up began. This class, whose number is increasing progressively, is in constant communication with the rest of the islands. And if today it constitutes the brain of the country, within a few years, it will constitute its entire nervous system and manifest its existence in all its actions.
It was not possible to brutalize the Filipinos. The march of progress cannot be stopped. But is it really? Didn't Constantino claim that the Filipinos are the type to venerate without understanding? Not to mention, as what Novi had mentioned before, the Filipinos became indulgent or lazy after they gained their independence from the Spaniards. Curious? If you are, then listen to my report on the Philippine status as a project and why it was regarded as such. During the Spanish colonial rule, it was the friars who took hold in educating the youth. Imagine, makatulog man gani ang mga bata sa misa, kana na bang sa klase nga murag prayer meeting. So of course, students became drained and brainwashed into following the church's doctrine. Some waste miserable years in classrooms only to come out tired, fatigued, and disgusted. However, this does not mean that the Filipinos could be brutalized. Despite the censorship that wants to close all roads to progress, despite all the pulpits, confessionals, books, and novenas that induce hatred towards science and the Castilian language, there are writers, free thinkers, historiographers, chemists, physicians, artists, legal advisors, and veterinarians and such, fighting for a broader scope of education. To quote Rizal, "Education is spreading, and the persecution it suffers fans it. The march of progress is truly unstoppable. The passionate fire that burns inside each of us is inextinguishable and has to shine to make itself known. So, ug magbagsa ka, ingnan lang imong nga ana si Rizal sa ihang narrative nga pagsulay ra ang tanan, pagsulay nga dapat mo fuel sa imong passion to shine." Now that my introduction is out of the way, let's move on to the interesting part. The advancement and moral progress of the Philippines is inevitable. It is fated. That is, at least according to Rizal. At first glance, this statement by Rizal might seem like a very positive outlook for the future. But trust me, it's not. Remember when Rizal said education is spreading and the persecution it suffers fans it? Ang pagsulay maka-fuel sa passion? Well, Rizal believed that such ideals must also be upheld when it comes to our country's affairs. To quote, "For her being a pronoun referring to our motherland, which is the Philippines, to remain under Spain, the Philippines must perforce be transformed politically, because this is demanded by the course of history and the needs of her inhabitants." However, this does not mean that Rizal is fine with letting the Spaniards take possession of the Philippines. Kisang giganan ana ang Spaniards makontrol sa Pilipinas? Because if that's the case, then mura na noon tag nagpag-BDSM sa Spain. But no, for him, the colonial relationship must end because history does not record in its annals any enduring rule of the people over another who belong to different races with distinct practices and customs and adverse or divergent ideas. Meaning, for Rizal, in order to avoid a violent separation from Spain, like aron maalikayan ng mga violent na pakikipag-alsa sa Spain, what we need to do is that we need to assimilate. In order to avoid a violent separation from Spain, we need assimilation, for us to fuse into one homogeneous social and political body. Pero, how do we do that? How can we become one homogeneous social body? Well, for Rizal, there are two fundamental reforms that when implemented and interpreted could dispel all clouds, confirm the affection of Spain, and make all subsequent ones fruitful. The two reforms referred to being free press and representation to the Spanish cortex. Take note, free press and representation to the Spanish cortex. Cortes. So what does each of the two fundamental reform means? Well, free press is acquired when a country has free media, its newspaper, magazines, and televisions and radio stations that are able to express any opinions they want, even if this criticize the government and other organizations. On the other hand, representation in the Spanish Cortes signifies the importance of the Cortes Generales as a state body derived from the fact that they represent the Spanish people, who is established by Section 66.1 of the Constitution of 1978. It means they hold sovereignty, according to Section 1.2 of the Constitution. If the Filipinos get represented in politics, then the Filipinos will slowly gain power. Of course, this was not included in the PDF provided by Ma'am, so I will cite the references. This is according to Brunetti A. and Weather B. of 2003 and Izaldi of 2013. Okay, now that we have grasped Rizal's plan to assimilate Spain and the Philippines, let's go back as to why the Philippines is regarded as a subject. Actually, Rizal's plan to assimilate Spain and Philippines is in hope that Spain will serve as a stepping stone for the country's advancement. Should the country remain a load to be exploited by the mother country, then she will one day declare and secure her independence. The hardships we'll face will make us stronger. So back again to Rizal's first point, pagsulay ra ang tanan, pero we must use this hardship to fuel our passion. The Philippines will dig up from the mines of gold to remedy her misery, an excerpt from one of the many beautiful phrases by Rizal that explains how we can develop from these hardships. The nation is a subject. The Philippines which is once a subject to cruelty, had now become a subject of advancement. Or at least, that's how Rizal envisions it. For, as we all know, this narrative by Rizal, where a discernible future is close, is far from reality. Because, after all, pag human sa pagsulay sa Spain, kay musulub daw sa pagsulay sa American, sa Japanese, may gani ba upatan nagdilab? Grabe, sa katagan na itong nagyan nga hardships, atong passion, gabukal-bukal na gali. So, that's all from me. Let's move on to the next reporter, which is vernacular emphasis.
One of the most well-known characteristics of Filipino people are being hard-working. One of its evidence is the creation of Banawe rice terraces, which were carved and built by hand 2,000 years ago by the ancestors of present-day Philippines. With this, how did the Filipino people, so devoted to their customs as a border on routine, abandon their former habits of work, of trade, of navigation, to the point of completely forgetting their past and gradually submit to indolence? On the essay of Dr. Jose Rizal, entitled Sobre la Indonesia de los Filipinos, or in English, On the Indolence of the Filipinos, which appeared in La Solidaridad from July 15 to September 15, 1890, he shifted his focus to acknowledge and address a general malady, which according to him appeared to be the presumed growth of strength and activity associated with the awakening of national spirit among Filipinos. As what Dr. Jose Rizal stated, indolence is a chronic malady or disease in our country, but it is not hereditary, as the Filipinos have not always been this way. As what he said on his essay, instead of regarding indolence as a cause of backwardness and confusion, we should regard it as the effect of confusion and backwardness. This can be traced down to the factors that sustained and aggravated our laziness. First is our tropical climate. Though we can't really make it as an excuse, since Philippines has been a tropical country ever since back then. As time passed by, we have known that severe work under the sun or heat of the sun is unnatural and injurious to health. And also typhoons and earthquakes year in and year out disrupt productivity. Another is internal disturbances. Our thoughts, perspectives, experiences are knowledge. We can't deny the fact that as our country developed, the range of our knowledge and understanding about the world also widened, creating different priorities and perspectives. Sometimes may even lead to misunderstandings. Development of economic and social aspects of the country which are brought by the invasions of the Dutch and Chinese or colonization. Piracy and wars also contributed on our indolence for the reason that this results frightful diminution of inhabitants and the abandonment of agriculture, industry, and commerce, which are the primary work of most Filipinos. Government and their nearsighted also contributed to this attitude. So, with the endemic official corruption and exploitative practices, a bureaucratic system that discourages commerce and industry, and the bad example of colonial officials with their penchant for luxury and aversion for physical exertion. Promotion of gambling also discourages labor with the promise of easy gain, gives the reason for people to rely on luck than on hard work. The extravagant and superstitious religiosity that drained material resources and prevent people from attending to real causes of misfortune. Instead of putting actions to achieve their goal, people just wait and pray for it without doing anything. Chronic insecurity of liberty and property, lack of encouragement to engage in commerce or agriculture, concentration of best agricultural lands in the hands of religious corporations, the lack of incentive for excellence and talent, and the backward educational system that works only to lower the dignity and self-respect of the students. Despite all of this, we should keep in mind that it is not entirely the fault of the government, as there were factors that emanated or come from the Filipinos themselves. Though affected by our environment, Filipino indolence still can be traced back to our attitudes within ourselves. But this is not entirely applicable to every Filipinos, and our hardworking nature is not completely gone. In the modern times, Filipinos are described as responsible, dependable, and hardworking due to the culturally rooted trait filial obligation, taking care of the sick family members, sending money to help pay for education of family members, and miscellaneous family needs. Our hard work also brought pride to our country and help in its economic aspect.
Deprivation of human dignity. Deprivation of human dignity focuses on the defective education system that the Spaniards implemented in the Philippines. The education system of the Filipino from birth to death is brutalizing, depressing, and anti-human. According to Rizal, the system of education is nothing more than a repetitive prayer, which prevents us to develop economically. It kills, paralyzes all tendency towards development. So instead of us making progress in development, we are developing backwards. Rizal believed that education is the solution to all the problems in the Philippines. The education system of the Spaniards did not even develop our agriculture industry, which our agriculture industry is our treasure. So, not to bring education to the Philippines, but to subjugate the Filipinos or to be controlled by the Spaniards. So, the education system of the Spaniards is not to bring us Filipinos education, but instead to take control over us. Absence of national sentiments. The Filipinos are afraid to stand up to the Spaniards, afraid to question the policies of the Spanish government. So they are afraid to question the Spanish government because they might be they are but they are most likely to be put in jail, or they have consequences. So the Filipinos learn the culture of silence. So Rizal concluded that the need of good education and liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of expressing one's ideas as the key to achieve progress in the Philippines.